everyone, it's Allie, and we're so excited that Infragistics Ultimate 16.1 is finally here. It is packed with the high-performance UX and UI tools you need to accelerate your application design and development process. I'm here with Jason Beres, who's going to take us through 5 easy-to-follow segments. And Jason, you want to give us a brief overview of the 5 segments you'll be demonstrating?
Yep, absolutely. So 16.1's pretty exciting release. We're covering everything from modern web development to design. So first off, we're really going to focus on how you can build cutting-edge modern web experiences. This includes our new Angular 2 support, how to build a responsive app, even our high-performing chart. So we're going to give you an overview of really the value of Ignite and then go into the new features that are coming inside 16.1. Then we'll look at Indigo Studio. Indigo Studio continues to evolve. This is a massive release for Indigo Studio. We're really excited about some of the new features in Indigo designed, as well as some maybe developer-focused features like code asset generation, which we're pretty excited to finally release to market as RTM. Next, we'll talk about mobile development. So mobile development continues to be the hottest topic on the planet. Everything from hybrid apps to native apps in iOS and Android. Even Xamarin now, with the announcements at Build this year, Microsoft open sourcing Xamarin and making it free as part of your MSDN subscription. So we're really excited to support all of those platforms, but also making sure that we're giving the right product and the right tools for those platforms as well. So we'll talk about our mobile app story. And then grids. We are the market leader in grids. We always have been, and we continue to invest in grids in every platform, be it Windows Forms, WPF, JavaScript, and very exciting, we'll demo for the first time as an RTM is our Android grid in this release. So pretty cool stuff. And then finally, data visualization. We've made some major improvements in visualization in our Windows Forms product, and then we're introducing a brand new control in WPF, a 3D surface chart, which, believe it or not, was our #1 requested feature on user voice. So we continue to listen to customers and bring that back into the product, and 16.1 is a really good example of that across the board.
Wow, that all sounds incredible. Yeah. Super excited. All right, well, why don't we get started with Ignite UI and Modern Web?
Let's do it. So let's go through Ignite UI really quick. What I wanted to do in sort of prefixing some of the new stuff around Angular is just talk about what Ignite UI is and what it really does for you. So I have a few slides just to walk through to talk to the value of what we're bringing in this platform. So when we think about Ignite UI, there's a few things that I immediately want you to think of. It really is about modern web development. It's about responsive design. It's about Angular 1 and Angular 2. It's about Bootstrap support. It's about MVC support if you're building in Visual Studio. It's about high performance, high volume data visualization and tabular grids. This is where we're investing across the board in Ignite UI. And when you are building a web application for a browser on a desktop, we want you to have that same level of capability on your mobile device. So if you're going to build a Cordova app, please go ahead and use Ignite UI. It's so when you think about Ignite, think about modern web development, and we continue to invest in that track. And with this release in 16.1, specifically around Bootstrap 4 support and Angular 2, we're continuing to ensure that you have what you need to build your app. So lightning fast for the modern web. We have virtualization across the board in our grids. Our chart is optimized for high performance in browsers. So if you have 100,000 records in your chart or 1 million records in your chart, I'm going to show you a sample of how fast that actually works. Same with the grid. There's multiple options as far as column and row virtualization, including load on demand. As you scroll, it'll actually load more records. So it's really up to you how you want to architect how the data gets displayed in your apps. And then sticking with data, we know that you have to present data in multiple ways. You have tabular data grids for simple lists. You might have a tree grid if you're building a financial application or you're kind of showing roll-up data on a column header. You might be working with OLAP backends, like a relational, an OLAP database like SQL Server, analysis services to get data, or SAP. Our grid supports those data sources as well. So you can take pretty much any type of data and figure out what type of grid Infragistics has to suit your needs. And then I did mention the high performance on data visualization, but we cover the gamut in visualization. So we think about common line of business scenarios, scientific charting like polar charts, scientific charts, radial gauges, linear gauges, barcodes, you name it, we cover it on the data visualization side. So specifically with 16.1, here's a few things that we focused on. The grid continues to get pushed in different scenarios. So what we did is we spent some time on refactoring some areas of the grid to give you optimal performance. We ran into some scenarios where if you had column fixing on and then you started moving columns, there was a little lag in the display. Well, we went ahead and addressed that. TypeScript in everything. We have TypeScript across the board, and this rolls right into how we approach Angular 2. Angular 2 is based on TypeScript, so when we look at Angular components, TypeScript's basically required, and we'll show a demo of that. IG tree grid, we implemented updating in the grid, so if you're updating data in the grid, it can go back to the server. And then the IG grid itself, a bunch of different features, custom row layout, filtering, updating, virtualization on that row layout, so you can have basically any design for a row that you want. So taking a single row of data, making it into basically any number of physical rows in the grid, and then having the grid capabilities go along with that. We have right to left support in the combo. Tile Manager, we did some updates to. We have Bootstrap 4 support, so if you've upgraded to Bootstrap 4, you get that SaaS support along with it. We've improved our icons for themes. So in the past, we didn't have scalable font icons. Now we do. So if you resize the grid or the screen resizes, you're going to get that capability with it. And then if you're still using App Stylus, which is a great tool for styling applications in ASP.NET, we have provided a V6 plugin for that in Visual Studio to make it super easy for you to use. So with that, I'm going to run into a few demos and kind of show you some examples of this modern web, data visualization, and then look at some of the Angular components and how you can use those. So let me minimize my slide deck, and I'm going to jump over to my browser here. And as a refresh, everything that you need for Ignite UI is on igniteui.com. So if you need to download the product, if you want to use our page designer, which if you're not familiar with our page designer, it's a WYSIWYG tool that lets you drag and drop our components onto a design surface, and then it has real-time coding with that. So you get a lot of coolness with page designer. If you're brand new to Ignite UI, you're not sure how to use the components, you're brand new to JavaScript, you don't know how to lay out a page, well, this is just like using like Windows Forms in Visual Studio, where you're dragging controls, property editor pops up, and you can customize the components and actually modify JavaScript in code behind. So it's a really slick tool. Here you can also look at our script combiner. So if you want to just use certain features of certain components and combine it to a custom script that you deploy, go ahead and get it right off of igniteui.com. And then of course all the samples with sample code, and every sample that we ship actually, and I'll flick over to one of the responsive design ones that I want to demonstrate, has Fiddle support for JS Fiddle. So you can just go ahead, click Show on JS Fiddle, it pops up, which means then you can go and modify it yourself, modify the code, tweak the properties, whatever. Or if you kind of already know how to use it and you just want to paste this into your app, go ahead, copy it, paste it in, no problem. But when we talk about modern web, one of the biggest things is around responsive web design. So I really like to show this example because what it really does is it brings to life, or it kind of brings to reality what responsive web design means in a line of business application. So if I'm building something for my users and they're used to going on the desktop, but then they move to mobile, how can I adapt that layout? Well, Bootstrap helps with Bootstrap layout. Infragistics has a layout component, but then you start looking at charts and grids and how does that actually work? Well, what we've done, and I'll just resize my screen here, is as I scroll, you'll notice that the columns are getting retemplated based on the breakpoints for the screen size. So now I've still got a grid. It doesn't make me scroll horizontally like on a tiny screen, and it's suitable for a mobile phone. Now if I click next and go to my pager, that still has full function, and it's still that great experience even though I take something that's really large meant for the desktop and I'm moving it down into something like a mobile phone. And I'll scroll down here and we can just very quickly look at how this works. So you'll notice that we have the features property in Ignite, and all we're doing is basically saying if this particular screen size is hitting the breakpoint for a mobile phone, show or hide this column. And then down here what we've done is if we hit a certain breakpoint on a mobile phone, we want to use a custom template. So we want to take some of those fields and just bind them into a custom template. So as the screen resizes, it's super easy for you to reconfigure it. And that really gets to the core of that modern web responsive design scenario. Likewise, if we look at charting, the chart has the same capability. As I shrink my screen size and resize my browser, I actually, the chart plays along nicely with it. But what I wanted to show here is just around pure performance. So I'm going to bump up my data points to 50,000, and we'll leave the refreshes per second at 30 milliseconds. So I'm going to go ahead and add those data points. And you notice how quickly they actually added. And now if I want to drill in, I can do so. It's very easy. You'll notice that I'm not actually using my mouse. I'm using my mouse pad. I could use my fingers for pinch and zoom. We have full touch support. But I'm going to go ahead and start this data feed. You'll notice that the numbers are ticking up at a pretty good clip, and the chart sort of looks like it's wiggling. Now if I zoom in, you can see that the chart actually has a smooth scroll across. So we're really focused on this level of performance in the browser in our HTML5 chart in JavaScript. So if you do have a lot of data, you still want to have really great interactivity. You'll notice there's no lag in my interactivity. As I zoom in and out, it's still super, super fast. You're going to get that with the Ignite UI chart. So now, I just kind of wanted to highlight those. What I want to do now is I want to flip over to our Angular support. So on GitHub, you can go ahead and download our Angular directives. This is our Angular 1 directives. Our Angular 2 directives are on GitHub as well. So basically, all of our directives are open source. If you want to improve them, contribute, fork, etc., be our guest. That's why they're open source. What I've done is I've downloaded this as a zip. So I have these locally. And I'm going to go ahead and just fire up our sample browser. So our sample browser exists on on GitHub, and you can download it. And you have all of the samples with everything that you need right here. So I'm going to go ahead and start my runtime for the browser, get my server going, and now my samples will pop up. And so everything now that would be on GitHub, I have locally. And so the big difference that you'll notice is not in the component, the way it looks, or the UI control. The big difference is Angular 2 itself. So Angular 2 is built on components. So in Angular 1, we said, oh, we have Angular directives. In Angular 2, we really have Angular components. So it's full TypeScript compatible. TypeScript really brings some sanity to the wild west and chaos of just general web development for large-scale applications. And what we've done here is we've ensured that all of our UI components in Ignite have an Angular component that go along with them. So the grid is just going to work like the grid should work. And what we did here on our samples is actually give you the code similar to our sample browser. And then if you want to flick over to other samples, like for example, if I go to editors, I can get a sample here of how the editors look. And all of this is data bound with Angular 2 components. So I will open up Visual Studio Code. I just opened up this folder. So essentially, we've got all of our samples here. So if you download this, you'll notice that all of the components are there that have Angular components. I just opened that folder in Visual Studio Code, and I just wanted to show you a couple things. So we have the TypeScript definition, which is really defining the component that we are using here. So in this case, the component ends up being the editor. And then we have the class for this component, and in this case, we're giving some default bindings to the default properties of these components. So the currency editor text value is going to be 12.1, the date is going to be new date, the editor is going to be Infragistics, etc. So when I look at this on my screen, you'll see 12.1, this is the date, this is the mask editor text. These are all the things that you actually saw in the component. And so what we're doing here is this looks very different from what you would expect in Angular 1 because this is all done in TypeScript. So it makes it super easy for you then to use language that you're familiar with, like C#, get your IntelliSense, your autocomplete, everything within an editor like Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio, and then build out normal HTML pages like you would with any framework. So in this case, because it's Angular, I'm importing my app.typescript. That's what we happen to call it. So that's imported into my HTML file. And then I've got the HTML, which is sort of surrounding what this makes up this screen. So it's all of the editors or the header and the footer. And then I'm actually loading the application itself, which ends up being the template that's bound to our directives, which are all of those text boxes. So with what you get off of Angular or off of GitHub, you get all of the Angular 2 components, and you can go in here, check out the TypeScript that we did for the samples, look at either just the pure HTML page, which is loading, importing those TypeScript directives to render the HTML. You can learn from these, modify them, etc. But they're really meant to support the huge shift from Angular 1 to Angular 2 development. So really that's it for the Angular 2 components. We're really excited about these. We want you guys to check them out, download them, give us feedback. We fully expect Angular 2 to be released very soon. I know Google I/O is coming up, ngConf is in a few weeks in May. So please download Angular 2, give us feedback, and that wraps up what we've delivered in 16.1 for modern web development.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. That was so exciting. I'm very excited about modern web.
Yep, as we are.
All right, so now we're going to move on to talking about data visualization, aren't we?
Yes.
All right, why don't you take us away?
Thank you, Allie. So let's talk about data visualization. At Infragistics, we have data visualization for every platform. If you're doing .NET, be it Windows Forms, WPF, ASP.NET, we've got you covered on basically every chart. The nice thing is we've invested on the Windows Forms side in the last maybe 4 releases to ensure that you have a great touch experience across the board with charts, and that you have the same capability that we've shipped in our JavaScript charting and our WPF charting. We also have charting for MVC if you're doing ASP.NET MVC. And when you're moving towards mobile, talking about iOS, Android, and Xamarin, we've got you covered there. So we continue to invest on data visualization across the board, and it's not just your common bar chart or line chart. We have every data visualization that you can imagine. So if you think about gauges, radial gauges, linear gauges, think about polar charts, think about radial charts, think about all of the financial charting that's out there and indicators for financial charting, as well as the ability to customize these charts with multiple series layered on top of each other, custom tooltips, custom markers. All of this is built into the chart, and along with that, you get the great experience of not only really rich mouse interaction, but also touch interaction as well. When we set out to look at charting, maybe in the 2006-2007 timeframe, we really thought about performance. And this core engine that we've built over the last 10 years has been optimized, battle-proven in every type of application you can imagine to target high-performance scenarios. So we're down to being able to render multiple millions of data points in milliseconds. And yeah, I get it. You don't need that on your iOS app, but on your rich desktop WPF app, you certainly need it if you're doing real-time trading, or you're doing a medical application, or you're doing any type of real deep analytics connecting into Microsoft Azure or any cloud service for big data. So when we look at data visualization, it really is about performance. And we also consider that on a mobile device, maybe you don't need that level of performance, but you do need great levels of interaction and touch capability. So we cover both sides there. I just have a few screenshots on some of the visualizations that we ship with the product, some of the visualizations that you might get in our ReportPlus product. But the idea is to give you a sense of the types of applications that you can build, be it on a desktop, be it on a mobile device, or for a browser. It really doesn't matter. So this is a nice cash flow dashboard. This is actually a Windows Forms example. It's in a file new Windows Forms app. You get this sample with all the source code. So everything I'm showing you here, you get all the code for. This is a great example. I'm actually going to show this demo on Android using our native Android components, which again are full RTM now with our new chart, our new grid in 16.1, and it's pretty exciting for us. But this sample is great because it's in Android, it's in iOS, it's in WPF, it's in Xamarin Forms, it's in Xamarin. So across the board, you've got the same capability, the same API in these data visualizations for any type of application that you need. This is a nice sort of Windows 8 style UI. Maybe might seem a little dated, but this really does show that you can build something very modern for the platform that you're trying to deliver on. And then of course, this is a great example of matching up large big data backgrounds with OLAP data sources and data visualization. So as we expand the OLAP chart, the chart on the right-hand side, the bubble chart is actually expanding and collapsing with that data. So it's actually a pretty sweet demo, of course, up on our website for you to grab. And this final screen just kind of shows an array of applications running on different devices. And the message I really want you to hear is that we support you on mobile, be it any platform, and we also support you in your .NET platforms as well. So with that, I want to show a couple demos of what we've brought forward in the 16.1 release. So first off, I want to talk about Windows Forms. And Windows Forms is still a big investment for us. It's a massive code base. It's tons of customers, tons of controls, tons of features, but we're still innovating and adding capabilities. So let me go ahead and open up our feature samples. And you'll notice in the What's New box, there's all kinds of things that are related to data visualization. And this is because over the last, like I said, 3 to 4 releases, we've been improving and bringing to Windows Forms this same data visualization experience that you get across all of the other platforms. So even if you want to refresh your Windows Forms app, maybe get it onto a tablet that has touch capability, you can do that now with Windows Forms. So I can just bring up any one of these samples and launch the sample just to give you an idea of the high fidelity and the beauty of what these look like, and of course the capabilities. So here is our donut chart, and I can actually just move this chart just like you would expect in any of our samples, completely customizable. But this is all happening in Windows Forms, so this is not something that you have to wait and say, I need to migrate to WPF to get nice animations and have real customizations across the controls. You get all this actually with Windows Forms today with not only 16.1, but we started shipping this stuff right around the 14.2, 15.1 time frame. Another nice feature that we shipped, everyone needs QR barcodes, even Windows Forms apps. So when you think about buying movie tickets online, when you think about having a marketing application that someone wants to very quickly scan with their phone and jump to a web page or open up an application, we fully support all of the capabilities of a QR barcode for any type of modern application. And then let me see, what would be another cool one to show here? We'll bring up multiple rings, and this is another example of the donut chart with multiple rings. So you can see you have an inner ring and an outer ring, and all those capabilities are possible today with your Windows Forms product. So with that, we have all of the line charts, bar charts, polar charts. This was like the tail end of our investment to move charting from that WPF modern code base over to Windows Forms. So any type of example or any type of application that you're building today that needs rich data visualization, you can do it with Windows Forms. Next, let me bring up one of the coolest visualizations that we've done in a while, I have to say. I mean, we do a lot of cool visualizations, but the 3D surface chart has been one of the most requested features from customers. In fact, it's the #1 feature that we've had on user voice. And the 3D surface chart can be used in multiple verticals. When you think about financial, stock volatility, strike price, when I should buy, number of days between pricing, curves, it's massive use cases there. When you think about gas and oil, think about exploration, depth, where sea levels are and how deep they can drill. You look at the oil and gas spaces, and just it goes on and on and on. So the 3D surface chart ends up being one of the more interesting controls, and it has neat features like the ability to bind to shapefiles. So a shapefile historically you could bind to our map control. Now you can also bind it to the surface chart. And as I hover over these levels, and this is Hawaii, you can actually see the intersections on my tooltip of the X, Y, and the Z axis. So this ends up being a complete 3D surface. So as I move this around, you can actually see the top of the island and the volcanoes, and I can move it, and you'll notice that all of my labels move along with it right to underneath. If you've seen any examples of HoloLens, you kind of get that same experience where you can actually immerse yourself into the world. We're not quite there with the HoloLens version of this, but the 3D surface ends up being something that's pretty slick. The other thing that we did work on too was theming. So of course, based on the type of data or the type of visualization you want. You can customize it. We have full theme support in WPF, and of course you can go to any level of granularity in theming for the 3D surface chart. This is exclusively available in the WPF product today, and we're really excited to kind of get your feedback on not only how we did the styling, but also things like performance. We did a lot on rendering performance with the multiple X, Y, and Z axis and the types of visualizations you can have. So please let us know how you end up integrating it. Next, what I want to do is show off some of the work we did in Android on charting as well. So let's break off, and I'm going to pop open my Android device. So what I'm going to do is open up the exact same sample I kind of showed already in the slides where I mentioned it was on every platform. So let me go ahead and click the financial stocks example, and you'll notice that we've got some various stock tickers across the top. We've got different chart types, and I can go into these chart types, and I have really super smooth animations, nice capabilities. And if I go ahead and just change the data set size, because that was our 3-month data set. Now if I go to 6 months, you'll notice that we have a smooth animation. If I go to 1 year, super smooth, 2 years, even up to 5 years, when I go in with my fingers and I start to manipulate the chart, move it around, drag and drop, zoom in, no matter what, I get the same smooth animations and I get that same responsiveness, which is really critical to the user experience that you would expect in a mobile charting application. So this chart, I just wanted to show you a few features of this, which is pretty slick. I can go ahead and I can change the different type of visualization that we're using for the chart. So you can see that we have some nice smooth animations. And as I start to move with my finger, it like jumps right into it. There's no lag, there's no delay. And this is your normal sample size of like a 3-month chart. So if I go now to 6 months, you'll see it re-renders. Let's go to 1 year. Let's go to 2 years. And you'll notice that this is no sweat. The visualization is super smooth. I can drag and drop with my finger, and I get really a nice experience across the board. So what I really just wanted to demonstrate was that with the charting capability, you do get that cross-platform experience no matter what you're building on. Now, with 16.1, you'll also get the Android sample browser. And with the Android sample browser, you get all of the charts as well. So if I go ahead here and let's take a look at some of the funnel chart samples, these are actually the same samples that you've seen in WPF. These are the same samples you see in every platform because it's the same thing. We've just translated some code and ensured that the API matches to the experience that you expect on the native platform. So definitely go ahead and play around with not only the new stuff on Windows Forms and WPF, but also what we're doing on native components as well. And with that, that's our story for charting and data visualization in 16.1.
Infragistics is synonymous with grids, so that's why we're really excited to be introducing the Spreadsheet Grid, which Jason is going to tell us all about.
Yep, thanks, Allie. So as Allie said, we've been doing grids forever, it seems. We've been in business for over 25 years, and the grids have always driven the value in the product. So with 16.1, we're shipping a spreadsheet grid in Windows Forms, which, as you know, we've had in WPF for a while now. And it's pretty exciting because now you can really deliver that exact Excel-like experience in Windows Forms. So I'm going to show that, and I'm going to show a few other interesting features that we've added across the grids for WPF, Windows Forms, and Ignite UI. So the first thing I want to show is the new spreadsheet grid in Windows Forms. So this is the Windows Forms sample browser. Everyone's familiar with it. I'm going to go ahead and launch the Spreadsheet Sample. This is very similar to the sample that we shipped earlier with 16 or 15.2 when this was like really early. It was really still sort of a CTP stage. Whoops. But what we did is we added capabilities not only to the UX of the spreadsheet control itself, but also to the Excel library. So the way that you work this sample is just like you would work Excel. You've got tabs along the bottom, and it's really just kind of showing all of the capabilities that you get with this spreadsheet grid. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is the same exact component from a capability perspective that you would get in WPF. So if you're building a WPF application, we have the XAMPP spreadsheet, and in Windows Forms, we've got the Ultra spreadsheet, and it really has all these nice capabilities. You know, I can add sheets, I can navigate between sheets, I can reorder sheets. So it actually behaves just like Excel. And what we did to sort of make it real apparent that it acts like Excel is we built IGXL. So you might remember IGXL in WPF, and it was really hard to tell the difference between Excel running and IGXL. You can open any spreadsheet with this thing. You have all the capabilities and all the commands of Excel. We went ahead and did the same exact thing for Windows Forms. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a source of project cost spreadsheet. This is a typical scenario for a spreadsheet experience. You'll notice across the top we've got our ribbon. All of this works just like you would expect in Excel. So I can make the screen bigger and smaller. I can change alignment. I can change cell styles. So essentially, you've got Excel here. Let me go ahead and insert some rows. So bam, I got some rows here. If I flick between tabs, they all tell me something a little bit different. Here's the data, which is driving the spreadsheet. So we're referencing cells back and forth. If I click the plus sign, I've got another spreadsheet, and I'll just do something super simple here. I'll say that C1 should equal, you know, A1 plus B1, and like it does math as well. So you get not only the capabilities of the formatting and styling, but it does all of the functions that you would expect in Excel as well. So it's actually pretty slick, and of course it wouldn't be complete without the whole backstage experience with the ribbon. So we really believe that if you're building this type of cell-based experience, remember most grids are based on the column. So I have the same data type on the column all the way down. Well, in a cell-based grid like Excel, you can have any data type in any cell, which is really what makes it interesting. You can create any type of form, any type of real data experience with this component. So we're pretty pumped about Excel moving forward. Now, another cool thing, back to our feature samples that we implemented in Windows Forms and WPF, is something called collapsible group columns. So let me open up this sample to give you an idea of what this actually means. So as you know, in Windows Forms, we've always had the concept of a multi-row column. So you could actually have like the address block, and the header column would say address, and then it might say, you know, address 1, address 2, city, state, zip, based on your layout. But those could all be in separate rows, so you had multiple rows for this, you know, grouped stacked column. Well, a real common scenario in insurance and financials is applications where you have tons of data, but you don't necessarily want to see it all the time. You want to sort of collapse it. So we've added the ability to collapse and expand these column groups in 16.1. So you'll notice here, I have the units sold group, and in it I've got sold used units, sold new units, sold total units, and if I collapse it, you can show and hide columns. You have full column experience here. So what I did is I just summarized up those 3 columns into a summary column. Pretty slick. Likewise, if you don't want to do that, you can minimize a column and just show nothing. You know, it's basically an empty template. So the idea is the type of experience you need to deliver for columns, but also doing some sort of custom template on the column ends up being pretty interesting. And let me pop open my WPF sample browser. So let's take a look at the grid sample in WPF. I'm going to drill in, and of course, as usual, you've got the updated flag. So we've got, I'll show editing in a second because that's a kind of a killer new grid feature. But let's go back to organization. And of course, we're trying to keep this consistent across the board. So now you have the same capability in WPF. Sometime in the near future, you'll have the same capability in Ignite UI and JavaScript. We're actually adding this capability in, hopefully before 16.2, but for sure you'll get this in 16.2. So then you have any type of app on any type of platform, and you can see here that I'm just collapsing and expanding my groups. Now the interesting thing is, if you're really knowledgeable of the grid, you realize, well, hey, now I can do multi-row columns. That's a new feature as well, and the ability to collapse and expand those column groups is a new feature. So let me scroll back up. And actually, you know what? We'll just look at the XAML since we're here. And what you end up getting here is there's nothing complex here. We're actually just defining the field groups. So we have our field groups, and inside those field groups, you've got fields. So just like you would define fields in the past, Now we've defined field groups, and in those field groups, you can have the ability to collapse or expand those field groups. So it's very consistent. So let me go back to the Windows Form Sample browser again, and let me pop open the same sample. And then here, if we look at how this was done, it's basically what you would expect. You've got the Ultra Grid group, and we're just adding columns to that band, to that group. So it's the same syntax that you get with adding any column and any group setting to Windows Forms. And then you've got allow group collapsing is a new property that we've added. So it's super simple to add this stuff across the board. So let me jump back to WPF real quick, and I want to show off a new editing feature. And this is cool. So we started this feature out because of Ime Mode. And if you're not familiar with Ime Mode, it's for mostly the Japanese market, but any market where there's multiple characters or representations of a word based on characters that you type. So the expected experience is that once I start typing, I get a drop-down box, and then I'm picking from that box what word I actually mean to stick into the cell. So now the way the grids usually work is that in order to get into an edit mode for the cell, you either have to hit F2, and I hit the FN, let me hit FN F2, and now I'm in an edit mode for this cell, or you do something like a double click. What we added in both Windows Forms and WPF for 16.1 is this concept of just immediate cell editing. So here we have Flyboys, and if I just start typing in, Infragistics, I immediately go into edit mode. So I don't have to worry about hitting a keystroke or having that secondary click or experience to actually get to the characters that I might need in Ime Mode, but it also just delivers a great experience for anyone that wants to just start having a really high performance editing across the board. So now with that, I want to switch over to the Android grid. So now with that, what I want to do is jump over to the browser and look very quickly and just kind of mention about the Angular 2 components that we're shipping with Ignite UI, and of course full grid support. So I did mention that we've added capabilities like tree grid updating and some other nice things around virtualization improvements in the Ignite UI grid for 16.1. But the big news is around Angular 2. So the ability now to build with TypeScript an Angular 2 component using our grid into your application is going to help you use that modern framework for your desktop browser development or your mobile development. And so let's switch over now to talk about the Android grid, which is RTM now in 16.1, and take a look at some of its capabilities. So let's go ahead and open up the Android sample browser. So you can download this APK, or you can just compile the samples yourself and deploy them to your Android device. So I'm going to go ahead and open the sample browser. I'm going to jump over to the grid samples, and we have a few topics here: specific columns, data binding, interaction, or responsive grid. I just want to start with columns and show off a few of these samples. So this is a simple text column, and I'll just show really the fact that yes, we can display text. Of course, that's expected, but check out the performance, the smooth scrolling. This is the really impressive thing about this grid. It's written from the ground up, optimized for mobile performance. And I'll just flip through some of the samples. You can see the different data types, the alignment's correct on numeric columns. We have nice image columns, and kind of the list goes on. So I'll just kind of flip through, and we've also done some interesting things around animation. So let me go ahead and add a column. I'll just click the add button, and you see things sort of slide in. If I drop this down, you'll see that the enum on this guy has a few different options: fade in, slide from top, slide from bottom, slide from right, and fade in. So let's do a slide from bottom and fade in, and click add, and you'll notice that that type of animation comes in. Now the message here is, yeah, are you going to actually have all of your columns slide in from the bottom? Probably not, but you can do anything you want with this grid, and that's the point. We've built in a whole animation framework, so whatever type of application you're building, you can deliver a very cool experience. So let me scroll down a little bit here, and we can take a look at some of the interactions. So we also have sorting capability. So as you would expect, if I hit a column, we can do sorting on that column. We cover multi-row sorting, But again, look at that smooth scrolling. So we start talking about more and more columns here, and as I scroll, we just get that really buttery smooth capability across the board. We've also have OData support. So what this means is you can have an unlimited data source on the back end feeding this grid. So check out what happens as I scroll. Did you notice that there was like maybe some blocks that weren't completely filled in with text? Well, that's because we didn't have text to fill in those cells yet. We're actually getting this from the OData source and pumping it into the grid. So you get a really amazing experience. And this is like how Facebook behaves, or Instagram or Twitter when you're scrolling really fast, and we really wanted that level of experience inside of the grid. And then finally on this guy, let me just show some responsive grid rotation. So I'll go ahead and I'll rotate, and you can see that we did a little animation here. So very cool. If you recall the Ignite UI demos where I showed you how to template based on breakpoints for your screen size, you have a similar experience here. So as I change from a vertical to a horizontal view, I can show different columns, but also we're kind of showing off a little bit of our animation framework as well. Hey, I get it. Not all line of business apps need that level of animation, but the point is we want you to be able to create any type of application with this grid. So we're really excited to finally release the Android grid to market.
Wow, so it sounds like we've done a lot of work on grids and various platforms on 16.1.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. I mean, the Android grid is like a major accomplishment for us. We've been working on it for a while. We're really pumped about the features, and we're going to continue to innovate there for mobile experiences across all mobile platforms. The spreadsheet's huge. I mean, the fact that I can basically create Excel without Excel is just amazing to me. And then, of course, all of the other smaller features in WPF and Windows Forms, and then the big news with Angular 2 support. So yeah, it was a big release for grids, and we're really excited to get everyone's feedback on it and hear what customers have to say.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about Indigo Studio and some unmoderated usability testing and some code generation.
Yep, so it's pretty cool, and we've been working on this for a while actually, and if you've been using Indigo Studio over the last 12 months, you've gotten a little flavor of what we're offering in the code gen side. We've improved it for 16.1, but the real big news is around this unmoderated usability testing, and we're going to talk about that today. So before I jump into Indigo Studio, I want to talk a little bit about usability testing. So the issue with most applications today is they get built without the user feedback or the stakeholder feedback, which is why we designed and created Indigo Studio. So Indigo Studio, as you know, is a UX prototyping tool. It allows you to design user flows, allow users to experience that entire application without ever a line of code being written, allows them to give feedback, and then we can take that and give it to developers, and then developers can actually build exactly what the users have given feedback on, and it's been tested, et cetera, et cetera. Well, up until 16.1, that has been done sort of in a very manual way. You could deploy an application to someone, they could view it on their phone, but there was no real good way to say, hey, at this point on my phone, I didn't know where to click. Well, that's where usability comes in. So this usability testing in Indigo Design allows you to create that end-to-end test. Why is the unmoderated part so important? Well, if you look at my graph here, it kind of makes sense. The more complex my application gets, because I need to build it to give to users to test, the more it costs. So that cost of change over time gets very, very expensive just to ensure that the application is doing what it's doing, and it's really not the real app yet. It's kind of just a prototype that we're pushing along. So we want to use Indigo Studio to not only create those low-cost end-to-end experiences, but then have a low-cost way of doing usability testing. So it really ends up being a one-to-many capability on the testing side. So we talk about designing in Visual Studio, or I'm sorry, in Indigo Studio. So we have the ability to prototype for web, mobile, desktop, design that whole user story, visualize it instantly, and then do the animations and really have that experience right in the application. You share the prototype up to Indigo Design, and that's where that validation occurs. So then I can create a usability study and have my users run that usability study and then get all of the analytics on actually what happens. So if we think about usability studies, you know, there's different types, of course. There's the in-person moderated, gets very expensive. This is what a lot of people do. Like, I'm building an app, let me walk around my office to the users that work there, which really maybe aren't my target users, but it's the easiest way for me to get user feedback. And then there's the remote and moderated, which is still very costly and it doesn't scale very well. So unmoderated actually allows me to invite as many participants as I want to this study. I can watch in real time as people are taking this study and then look at the analytics even right through the click map that we provide in Indigo Studio. So I've asked George Abraham, our product manager at Indigo Studio, to really give us a good example of having that application designed in Indigo Studio, pushing it up to indigodesign.com, creating a usability study, and then looking at those analytics coming from the usability study. So George, take it away.
In this video, we'll show you how to set up a new usability study and then invite participants. For creating a usability study for a prototype, you need to first share it on indigodesign.com. We are going to use a prototype I have already shared called the Money app. And from the prototype's detail view, let's select the Create New Usability Study option. When you create a new study, it's automatically added to the Usability Studies section on indigodesign.com. This way you can go there directly to review results for any studies in progress or to review older studies. A new study has three main sections. The first section allows you to add some welcome page content, which is what your participants will see before starting the study. The second and the most important part is the section to define your usability study tasks. And finally, you can add a thank you page content to suggest future actions for participants completing the study. You need at least one task defined to start the study. The usability study can be conducted remotely and unmoderated. That means any number of participants can take the study at the same time. So how you phrase your tasks and the detail present in the prototype may influence the outcome of the study. So to assist with this, as part of setting up a new task, we let you record the task steps or flow required for completing the task. This way, as a study moderator, you will know upfront whether the prototype will indeed support the task and does not lead participants to a dead end. So for the first task I'm adding, assume that you spent some money on a cup of coffee. Record the expense using this app. Now let's record the user flow for completing the task. Clicking on Record the Task Flow launches the prototype and the recording interface. I will mark the UI state I'm currently viewing as the starting point for this task. Of course, depending on the task, you can interact with the prototype and get to a UI state you need before marking it as the start point. Once you mark as the start point, we will start recording the UI states leading up to the final destination. I'm going to add a new coffee expense, add coffee, and as you see on the left, we have recorded all the steps leading up to this task. If you made a mistake, you can always undo the last step and do it again. Once you're done, save the task flow, and that's it. So using the same approach, I went ahead and defined two additional tasks for this particular study. Let's officially start the study and use the invite option either from here or from here. You can share this link over email, IM, or post it on our forum. You can make changes to the study as long as you have no participants. Once participation begins, you cannot make changes. And when you have enough participants, you can close the study to prevent additional sessions. So in this video, I'll show you what the participants can expect to see when they start a study. In order for them to get here, the study moderator should have shared a link with them, which will let them take part in the study. So the participants don't need to install anything to take part in a usability study. As long as they have access to a web browser, they're all set. When they get here, they'll see some welcome page content, which the study moderator has put in as part of the study. To get started, they will say Start Usability Study. The usability study tasks are presented one at a time via a task prompt as shown here. When you start the task, this task prompt is hidden, letting you interact with the prototype to complete the task. When you feel you're done with the task, click on I'm done, and that will proceed you to the next study. So let me just start this task, which is assume that you have spent some money on a cup of coffee, record this expense using this app. When you start, and now I'm all set to try out the study. So to add a coffee expense, I would go here, click on a coffee, add the coffee. And at this point, if I feel I have completed the task, I can go here and basically hit I'm done. As a participant, I can also lead some suggestions and feedback for the moderator. So in this case, I can say, This was very easy to do, and that's it, right? So this information is recorded as part of this task, which the moderator will get to review. If you feel you're getting stuck in the task and you don't know how to proceed to the next step, you can always use the guide me approach, which will actually provide you a visual hint as to where to click next. So in this case, I'm saying I'm done, and that'll automatically take me to the next task. Once you have finished all the tasks in the study, you will see the thank you page with future actions provided by the study moderator. And that's it. That's how participants would take part in a study. So in this video, I'll show you what the study results look like after a couple of people have taken part in a study. So one main purpose for conducting a usability study is to find out how well your design meets users' expectations and to get some data to evaluate this empirically. So the usability studies on indigodesign.com are remote and unmoderated in nature. That is, the study moderator does not have to be present when somebody is taking part in the study. To view study results, navigate to the usability studies section and then select the study you have going on. So the study report has three main views. One is this study overview, which provides a high-level summary of how many users participated in the study and completed the task successfully. It shows the average time required to complete the task and whether users made use of guidance when completing the task. If the user uses guidance, then the task is automatically marked as failed. The second view is the task details view, where we provide a more granular view of how participants completed a particular task. You can see how many people completed, how many people skipped the task, and how deep in the task they get before they failed or completed or skipped. The task details view also shows a step-by-step view of the task. If for some reason, say most of your users quit or requested guidance at, say, step number 2, then that's the part of the flow you need to redesign first. You will also see a comment count if the participants have left comments for you. So in this case, 13% of all users kind of quit the task at this point. So going to step 1 to step 3, we have lost 1 user. So now it's saying 9 users. And the final study results view is what we call a click map view. The click map view shows where the participants ended up clicking. It captures both the attempted interactions shown in red and also the successful ones. Successful interactions are the ones that lead to the next step in the recorded task flow. I can kind of go through each of the steps and see exactly where participants are clicking. So in this particular UI state, everybody is clicking on the right thing. I can also review any comments which are left for me as a moderator to review as part of that step. I can also go to the next task and view exactly the same kind of report of where people have been clicking for completing that particular task. And that's a quick summary of what kind of study results you can expect from a usability study on indigodesign.com.
Okay, thanks, George. That's pretty awesome. And literally, there's entire companies built around just unmoderated usability studies, and you get this as part of your Indigo Studio subscription. So pretty exciting, pretty amazing stuff, and we're really looking forward to your feedback on it. And as we evolve the capabilities, it's really going to be based on what you guys are saying in the market. So let's talk about code snippets. One of the gaps that we had in Indigo Studio was that if I did design something and I still had my development team waiting for this design after I did all my usability studies and it's really ready to go, is there a way that can help me kickstart that application? Can I take what the designers or the business analysts have designed and gotten user feedback on and then use that somehow in an application? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we've been sort of working on this over the last 12 months. 16.1, we're really happy to release to market a really solid version of generating JavaScript and HTML and CSS from designs in Indigo Studio. So let me give you a quick example of that. So I'm going to open up Indigo Studio, and this is actually, the icon's gray because I'm just using an internal build I just downloaded right now. Your build will have the beautiful purple and blue logo up on the top. But let me go ahead and open up something like the My Money application, which is something that we have stored. And this is like any other application. I've got several screens. Of course, if I show my screen states, you can see all of the different states that this screen makes up. So Indigo Studio does all that really, really well. But what I want to do is go to more options. And you'll notice here, I've got manage code generation. So what I want to do, and I'm going to select the dev version of this. You won't see the word dev, but I'm going to go ahead and select dev, and I'm going to click done. So now what's happened is for this particular prototype that I'm working on, code generation is available to me. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this screen. And this screen kind of has a lot going on. You know, there's arrows, there's a repeater control, there's all kinds of stuff. Well, what I want to do is get some code assets out of this screen. So what I can do is click the code button, which is up here on the toolbar next to run screen. Let me go ahead and click that. And you'll notice that I have a screen on the right-hand side. And let me go ahead. This is essentially a browser window. So let me go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. But what do you notice here? All of a sudden, I'm getting all of the CSS that makes up this screen. And as I select different elements, the CSS is changing. And if I scroll down, the HTML that makes up this screen, this is all formatted, well-defined HTML. And if there was any JavaScript, there would be a JavaScript section as well. So the way this works is as I select elements on the screen, the selection gets updated so I can generate just assets that I want out of a particular screen state. Or if I click screen state, I can get the entire screen state, copy that to the clipboard, and use it. So to make this a little simpler, I'm going to go and do a new project. And I'm going to do a new screen. And I'm going to do something very, very simple. So let me go back to my project 3. I'm going to make sure I got code generation turned on, which I do. Click done. Go back to my screen. And I'm going to close this here just to add a couple things to my screen. So this is using the Essentials pack. And in the Essentials pack, as you know, I've got a bunch of different components. Let's change my screen to not 800 by 600, but let's make it look like an iPhone. So I've got my iPhone here. I'm going to go back to my Essentials, and I want to drag a tab up here. And what I'm trying to do here is just kind of create a less complex screen so you sort of get the idea of what's happening here. Let me go ahead and put a grid on my screen, and you know what the heck, I'll just add a drop down. So this is very simplistic, but it's a few screens of Indigo. If you're not familiar with Indigo, the way Indigo works is as I click on elements, I get a property editor. If I want to do things like interactions, I can add an interaction. So when the user taps, clicks, swipes, etc., I can change the screen state. I can navigate to another screen state. It's really an end-to-end prototyping to deliver that experience to your users before you write any code. So now if I click my code display, let me go ahead and select my tab control, and I'll make my code editor a little bit bigger. I have a very high resolution screen, so this is defaulting to that size. I have a Dell, it's like a 2500 by 1900 resolution. But check this out. I selected this tab control. I get the simple CSS for the tabs. I get the location of the tabs. I get the HTML for the tab itself. And then I get the JavaScript, which is initializing this widget on the screen. If I select the grid, even more interesting, you'll notice I've got the ID as grid 1 in my HTML, class is grid 1, and then I've got the data grid data, which then I'm going to populate into what? Into the IG grid. So what we're doing is we're actually generating Ignite UI, JavaScript, and HTML based on the elements that we have in the toolbox that we map controls to. So things like the grid are perfect for that. So if I modify properties on the grid, they'll reflect back to the JavaScript source and the HTML source that I'm creating. So the spirit here is that I want to now give this to my developers so they don't have to start from scratch. I already have a layout. I already have controls. I have them positioned where I want. They look like how I want them to look from a CSS perspective as well as just from the pure capability, and they can go ahead and take it and it can kickstart their development. So if I look at the entire screen state, I've got my CSS, my HTML, and then of course all of the JavaScript code, including the IG grid code, which is Ignite UI, which now I can go and take and use in my applications. So with Ignite UI, we believe that you've got the best JavaScript framework on the planet, and then you marry that with Indigo Studio, and you have a great story moving forward for doing a design, then doing your unmoderated usability testing, and then bringing that into development that much faster.
Jason, thank you so much. That was such an informative webinar, and 16.1 is shaping up to look really exciting.
It's a huge release, so yep, please download 16.1 today. If you're a new customer, there's all kinds of how-to videos, there's help documentation, and everything you need is online. Existing customers, run the upgrade utility. I think you're going to be really pumped about what you see in 16.1. And of course, if you have any questions, shoot me an email, jasonb@infragistics.com, and I'm always here to help.